Hello, hello. Today I'm going to talk about sex toys, BDSM, kink, and sacred sex. Is there an intersection? And I think that's kind of an interesting question. I hope you do too. And when you think of sacred sex, what do you think of? Do you think of meditation and sacred music and tantra and the connection to God? Do you think of energy work and energy exchange and eye gazing? Do you think of doing rituals that make sex sacred? Do you think of sacred music and candles and, a special sacred objects sitting around in the room? What do you think of when you think of sacred sex? I have to say, chakra healings, oneness, consciousness, intuitive guidance, mind, body, spirit kind of experiences, essential oils. I have to own that this is exactly what I have always thought of as sacred sexuality. Some people even think of it as a religious experience that, it has to be sanctioned by God in a very obvious way for it to be sacred sexuality. So there are many, many things that go into what we normally think of as sacred sexuality. Does any of them have to do with sex toys, BDSM, or kink? I doubt it. But let's move on and let's examine, whether or not there is any kind of possibility of an intersection between these things. That's what I want to do today. I want to blow up all your definitions about what you think of as sacred sexuality and what you think of as things that are nasty or perverted or whatever. I want to blow up that idea and see if we can just allow ourselves to get rid of our opinions and our judgments and our limiting beliefs about what it should look like and what it should be defined as, so that we can have as full and expansive and rich and deep an experience as possible. One of the things that I've come to believe about sacred sexuality is that it's about intimacy. And intimacy is about honesty and self-disclosure and being transparent. And that doesn't come from hiding certain parts of ourselves and never exploring certain parts of ourselves. Now, I want to have a disclaimer up front that I'm not talking about child molestation. I'm not talking about animal abuse. I'm not talking about physically hurting someone. I'm talking about two adults mutually consenting to an exploration process that expands and deepens and enriches their understanding of one another and their experience of connection, because that's what sexuality is an experience of connection. And I know you've heard me talk before about expanding the definition of sacred sexuality to go beyond genitals and to be related instead to the generic definition of sexuality, which is the connection energy. And that can be, a connection, a passionate connection, mind, body, spirit connection to the landscape, or to exercising, or to a musical experience. So I've already talked about a lot of that, but I've never talked directly about this of, can we expand the definition of sacred sexuality to consider the possibility that these things that we've had in our minds as not sacred could actually be included. So let's go on with our exploration of, when you think of, let's take sex toys next. What do you think of? You think of vibrator. That's the first thing I think of, vibrators and dildos. anal plugs, penis rings, penis pumps, yoni eggs, and physical stimulation. Whereas I think of sacred sexuality is a mind, body, spirit experience. I always used to think of sex toys as being just a physical stimulation. So talk about limiting. But, when you think of sex toys, you could also think of feathers and silk, and the experience of textures and, a fan that lightly blows or waves over you to create an experience of the wind caressing your body. Even when we think of that, it's like toys can be so much more than the technical supports that we think of. They can be things that are sensual and not just genitally stimulating. So even in the way we think of a particular category of things like sex toys, we can expand beyond the normal, quote unquote, way that we think of those things. And let's move on to, BDSM and kink. What do you think of when you think of those, swingers and literal swings, of people sitting in swings and having sex that way, or ropes and tying people up, or, the domination and submission dynamic, or spanking with paddles, dressing up in costumes, fantasy play, role playing, multiple partner kind of swinging parties, or polyamory where you have multiple partners. Now, on the surface, again, these things seem so different than sacred sexuality. They feel like very different things, that the kink, the BDSM, the toys, but are they really? What about the concept that everything is part of God or part of the universe, part of the oneness? Then wouldn't it all be sacred in one sense of the word? Because it's all part of the oneness, part of God. And if you expand your definition out to being sexuality is connection energy, and being sacred, is part of the spiritual realm, what would we think? What would we learn from that? What might happen if we could explode our narrow definitions? So I've come up with some questions. What if we could release every opinion that you have about it and just be neutral to exploring? So these are some of the questions that I came up with, just brainstorming for a few minutes. And you may have some much better questions, in which case I would love to hear them, because I'm not the smartest person in the world, and I know I don't know everything about these topics for sure. So I'd love to have you write to me and at helen@helenhillix.com and tell me what your thoughts are about questions. So what if you have control issues? Let's start with the top of just some different things to explore. What if you have control issues? And control issues come from anxiety. They come from anxiety that something is going to happen. And so we've always got to be in charge of our environment. And what if you are that kind of person that comes from a lot of trauma, and you have a lot of anxiety, and therefore you're very controlling, and you are actually healed from the experience of being tied up and learning how to truly surrender during a sexual experience, or maybe just a sensual experience, with feathers and fans again. My definition of sexuality is also sensuality. It doesn't have to be genital stimulation. But what if you could allow yourself to experiment with that, and to do it over and over again with the kind of music that allows you to feel safe and relaxed? Couldn't that possibly be a sacred experience, liberating you to be able to subsequently surrender into the oneness and into connecting more deeply with yourself and or a partner? That the idea that that kind of, bondage experience could be a healing and sacred experience, something to think about. What if you've never relaxed enough to have an orgasm, and using a vibrator enable you to reach that level of experience that liberates you then to experience it with a partner? Wouldn't that be a powerful and sacred experience, to be able to open up that portal to pleasure? And what if you are limited in your belief from a religious upbringing or something, that you shouldn't be having sex with yourself? You can't have sex with yourself. You can only have sex with your partner. And you finally allow yourself to pleasure yourself with a vibrator and realize that you don't have to have a partner, a man or a woman. You don't have to have a partner for that kind of pleasure. Wouldn't that be a sacred and liberating experience? What if you've always resisted anal stimulation, for instance, but opening yourself to that experience allows you to bring in a deeper level of trust and connection, whether it's with yourself or with a partner? Wouldn't that be a sacred experience, that you are able to, again, open your mind and release your judgments and develop more intimacy, because you are developing a deeper trust with that person, a deeper ability to relax into the connection with that person, a deeper belief that that person cares about you and will stop when you want to stop, and is willing to experiment with things that might pleasure you both, even if it makes you feel risky and vulnerable. That might be a level of sacred sexual connection that you never would have had without that willingness to try anal sex or anal stimulation. And what if you have felt powerless all your life, and you have taken on that role of victim? What if you then set up a domination submission dynamic as an experiment, and you are the person who's dominant, who gets to say exactly what's going to happen when? And then you switch roles, and you are the person who submits but gets to say no whenever you feel it's right to say no for you. You never have to do anything you don't want to do. Wouldn't that be a sacred, spiritual, physical, sexual, and emotional experience that would heal you? It could heal you. And I have had people, Alexa Martinez from I can't remember what she's called now, the Sex Chick or something on Facebook, but she was the first person that I talked to who really helped me understand that. And it was an amazing concept to me at the time. That was years ago, but it was an amazing concept to me, that kind of kink that we think of as kink could actually be a very healing, nurturing, loving, and sacred sexual experience, and a great intimacy and great liberation for some people. And what if your past training has limited your sexual experience to avoiding anything like that? And you are finally able to stop being so narrowly defined. And because there's more to be experienced, but you've never allowed yourself to have it. What if you are able to do that, and you finally break out of that and just explore and experiment? How could that possibly transfer out into your ability to have sacred sexuality with life? With the belief that, wow, I can go beyond my limiting beliefs. I can risk being vulnerable. I can risk experimentation. That could be incredibly sacred and powerful. And what if your past training has limited your experience of sexuality, period, and held you back through guilt and shame? And what if you could break free of that and allow yourself to be guided by your own feelings and your own intuition and your own connection to the universe, not through any social or religious or familial restrictions, but through your own guidance. You know, whether it's through sex toys or kink or BDSM or role playing or whatever it is. You know, what if you could push yourself through that portal that has kept you so limited and shut down? That would be a pretty sacred experience. And what if you want to experiment with polyamory or swinging, and you found out that it liberated you from a feeling of being insecure and possessive? Now, I'm not advocating any of these things. I'm just saying, what if? And what if you tried them and you decided that, you know, they weren't for you, but you were able to let go of your self judgments and your self-limiting judgments of others and just open your mind to that? You know, it might not be what you find works well for you, but then it might. You know, we just don't know until we've tried it. And what if you have painful body shame issues and have a series of perhaps paid experiences or casual experiences without an emotional attachment, but with people who are aware and caring and are able to help you heal that self-hatred, you know, without needing to marry that person or whatever? How would that liberate you and heal you? And what if you've been so afraid? I knew a guy like this, that, you know, so afraid of sex that you never dared to even have sex, fearing that you wouldn't be able to perform or satisfy, you know? And what if you were able to feel supported, to hire a sexual surrogate who could guide you through that fear and train you and liberate you so that you can move to the other side? You know, there are people, Pamela Madsen is one of them, who are offering people sexual experiences in a very professional way to help people break through their limitations. And it's, you know, it's controversial, but it's becoming more and more and more popular because people are craving that kind of liberation from the suppression that they've suffered from. And that is a sexual liberation and a sacred liberation. What if you consciously planned to integrate some of the sacred elements with the toys or with a BDSM experience of the candles and the staging and the lighting and the music? You know, what if you consciously planned to integrate those things? That could be a very pleasurable and fun and expansive experience. And what if you set up an intention to stay connected and to make whatever experience you're having sacred, whether it's hiking or sex or massage or eating dinner or driving to work? What if you could expand it all the way to that? That would be sacred sexuality in my book. You know, our world is so full of opinions about what is right and wrong and what men should do and what women should do. And wouldn't it be incredibly sacred to be free of that, free of those old beliefs and habits, and just be yourself and be guided by your own intuition and experience and common sense? And again, I want to go back to, this doesn't mean that we have free reign to have sex with our neighbor's wife without permission, or that we have free reign to have sex with children or animals or whatever who don't have the ability to give consent. In everything that I'm talking about, I really want to emphasize this. We need to consider our awareness and our consciousness. We need to bring in our awareness and our consciousness. We need to consider the impact of our actions on others and discuss things with those involved and make sure there is true mutual consent. There are considerations, in other words. But given that you do this, there are so many possibilities. So many possibilities. And some people do not have the consciousness to be able to handle polyamory, for instance. It takes an incredible amount of open communication and dealing with everybody's feelings and jealousy and envy and insecurity. So I'm not naive in thinking that, oh, well, you just go out and have fun and everything's going to be sacred and wonderful. I know better than that. But today I'm focusing on if you develop some consciousness and if you apply that in your life and in your sexual exploration, you can bust loose of a bunch of limiting stuff that's keeping you from having the best experiences that you can have. So I want you to educate yourselves, have conversations, watch educational videos from people like Susan Bratton and Dr. Patty Britton and Betty Dodson and others. Read reviews about toys and try them if you feel guided to. Let's explore and support each other to explore with neutral minds and move beyond just thinking that sex is friction and fantasy, as Dr. Steven Snyder said on one interview I did with him. And let's just see that it's so much more. Thanks, guys.